Welcome, listeners. You're remotely in Reno, Nevada, and we're getting ready to go right now to Conservative Commandos radio show.
The Conservative Commandos radio show, where the newsmakers go to be heard.
This is Congressman Alan West, and you're listening to the Conservative Commando radio show.
Welcome, everybody, and welcome, fellow patriots. Welcome once again to the Conservative Commandos radio show. I'm Rick Trader, coming to you from the studios of the Conservative Commandos radio network. And a shout out to our stations in Jacksonville, Tampa, and the Villages, Florida, Las Vegas and Reno, Nevada, Macon, Georgia, Lancaster and Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Colorado Springs and Boulder, Colorado, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Long Beach, California, around the world on the internet. We are everywhere. We are everywhere. And joining me today as my co-host is the patriot from the Garden State of New Jersey, that is Anna Little, and also the patriot from the battle-born state, the Silver State of Nevada, Sharon Angle.
Well, it's my honor to introduce Josh Hasten, who hails from Indianapolis, Indiana. Josh moved to Israel making Aliyah in 2002. He's currently the incoming director of the Gush Etzion Foundation, an organization which supports educational, welfare, community development, and security projects in the Gush Etzion region just south of Jerusalem. Hasten has also hosted his own talk radio shows on various stations and networks for the past 8 years and currently hosts Israel Uncensored on the Land of Israel network at thelandofisrael.com. Welcome to Conservative Commandos radio show, Josh Hasten.
Thanks so much. It's an honor to be here.
Well, it's our honor and pleasure to have you, Josh. And we want to talk a little bit about what's going on in Israel. We hear rumors of a new peace plan. Is there peace in the air or not?
Unfortunately, no, there's no peace in the air here. We try to do our best to live our lives here in Israel day to day and be safe and, just go to work and come home safely at the end of the day and send the kids to school and bring them home safely. But overall, there is no peace, unfortunately, as long as our neighbors continue to educate their children to hate, as long as that is the reality here. And I'm referring to the Palestinian Authority, our neighbors here, that there will not ever be peace. It doesn't matter what peace plan is put together, formulated, whether it's from the United States or the European Union or whomever it is, as long as the next generation is being taught to hate, unfortunately, we are not going to have peace here in the near future, Sharon.
Well, that's sad news for you and for the rest of the world. And, something really unsettling. You said there was a terror attack on the road right outside your house Friday. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so anytime we hear sirens, you hope for the best and fear for the worst. So just where I live in Gush Etzion, it's a community just south of Jerusalem, really a suburb of the city of Jerusalem. The other day at about 6:30, Friday morning, 6:30 a.m., our time, you heard the sirens, and we found out as the morning went on, just within minutes really, all the details came in. You had an Arab terrorist, a 17-year-old young man who decided he was going to use his car as a weapon. We've seen this type of attack all over the world, but unfortunately it started here in Israel, and tried to run over. Actually, his first victim was a 75-year-old U.S. citizen who lives here in Israel, a Vietnam War veteran. And this man survived by the skin of his teeth. He jumped over the guardrail on the side of the road, was actually struck by the car, and he actually saw the smile on this terrorist's face 3 seconds before he hit him, and he sustained wounds. He had to have his head glued back together, stapled back together, and other wounds. He's still suffering now, but that's considered a light injury. Seconds later, the terrorist took the car and kept on going down the road, the main north-south Route 60 here in Gush Etzion, which actually extends all the way from Beersheba in the south all the way to the town of Shechem or Nablus in the north. And he ran over another man, a gentleman, a father of 6, an immigrant from India, an immigrant from the B'nai Menashe, the lost tribe of Menashe, who lives here in Israel. He hit him with his car, and this gentleman is still in very, very serious condition in a local hospital here in Israel. So he had to have emergency brain surgery. And unfortunately, in this area and throughout the country, we've seen these types of attacks. Actually, the terrorist, I should add, he actually, after he ran over this poor young father of 6, he got out of his car with a knife and tried to stab soldiers. So, we saw this, where was it, in Manhattan? It's very hard to keep track, unfortunately. We saw it in Manhattan a few weeks ago. We've seen these types of attacks all over Europe, different places in the U.S., and this is unfortunately where they originated, and they're still going on from time to time here in Israel. So that was just another Friday morning, and we're praying for the young man, the father of 6, that he should have a speedy recovery and just be able to go lead his life and be a father and a husband. And he works in a local school here in the community. Hopefully he'll be okay and he'll get back on his feet. It's going to take a long time. He's still in very, very serious condition.
Wow. Well, our prayers are certainly with him as well. It just begs the question, Josh, why did you aliyah? Isn't it safer in the U.S.? Why did you take your family to live in Israel in what seems to be a climate that they hate you? They didn't want you there in the first place, and they're trying to kill you.
Well, you could make the argument, especially in the 9/11 reality that we live in today, there really isn't a place in the world that's 100% secure. And what I tell people in terms of the security, at least here in Israel, you have an IDF, an army, and security forces who are on guard 24/7, who are anticipating these types of attacks. In other situations, we saw what happened, unfortunately, in Las Vegas or in Manhattan, and of course 9/11. In other situations, you don't have that preparedness that we have here in Israel. So honestly, I feel safer, even with what's going on, I feel safer at 2 o'clock in the morning in downtown Jerusalem than I ever did in Indianapolis, Indiana, where I grew up. But that is the reality. Despite it all, it's still a more free lifestyle, a more free sense of living and security with all the craziness. So in other words, it can happen anywhere. It has happened everywhere. We've seen it in the U.S. and Europe. We see it throughout the world. And, Israel, I'll always love the United States. I'm a citizen, proud U.S. citizen, but Israel is my home, my spiritual home. It's where my ancestors are from, and it's the God-given home of the Jewish people. So I felt that this was the move to make. And back in 2002, when the situation was even much worse back then, with buses blowing up and cafes blowing up, we decided to make the move, and could not be happier. No regrets.
No regrets. That's exciting to hear. I know that in a recent trip that I made to Israel, I met you actually, and it does feel safe there. And I was surprised at how safe the West Bank cities are, and it all has to do with, you mentioned the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, and an interesting definition, I suppose, of the Army of Israel. They're purely for defense. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so this is a citizens' army. You have young men at the age of 18 who are drafted into the army. It's obligatory unless you have a specific reason why you can't serve. Women serve for about 2 to 2.5 years. Men serve for about 3 years. So you have a citizens' army where these young men and women are giving the best years of their life, dedicated to protecting the country. There are many, many different responsibilities that go along with Army service, whether they're in combat units, whether they're intelligence units, so many different ways that people give back to their country. And that's really what it's about. It's about putting country first and really getting a sense of purpose and meaning as to why we live here, why the Jews came back here after 2,000 years of exile. And I unfortunately was too old when I met Aliyah. I tried as best as I could to begging the IDF to take me, but I was too old for them. They didn't have the budget for me. But for the other young men and women, they're getting an experience, and they should all be well and safe. They're getting an experience which really connects them. It's not only about the military aspect, but it's also about getting to know the country, getting to know the land, knowing why we're here, knowing what you're fighting for. It's all about the purpose of what we're doing here. So that's just in a nutshell describes the type of the army we have. And as you mentioned, yes, when necessary, Israel does strike, whether it's in Syria, and of course not a lot of this is ever confirmed, whether it's in Syria or in other countries around the world. Israel does what it has to do to protect its citizens and the Jewish people around the world. But we are here for defense. Israel is here to survive, and unfortunately, in a sea of hatred and hostility surrounded by 21 countries, some of them are coming around, but very, very slowly, who want to see us wiped off the map, including the Palestinian Authority. If you look at their maps, it has the word Palestine on it, covering the entire length of this country, whether it's Tel Aviv, Jaffa, Akko, Tiberias, it doesn't matter. They're talking about, when they say they want a state, they're talking about the entire country. They admit it in Arabic, They don't admit it when they're talking to CNN in English, but all you have to do is listen to what they're saying to their own people, and their children, their citizens in Arabic to really know what their goal is. And as you mentioned, we are here to defend ourselves, and that is why that terrorist on Friday, even though he successfully ran over 2 people, that's why he was immediately, seconds later, taken, neutralized, as they say. And I'm not sure his status now. I know he himself was in very, very serious condition. But thank God for the soldiers there on the scene, or it could have been much.
Well, I was listening to your interview with Sharon Engel, the first segment, and I'm very interested in talking to you about this terror attack that happened on the road just outside your house on Friday. We've got terror attacks happening all over the world now, and I know Israel's ahead of us in their experience with regard to this, and they've taken measures to protect their people in such a way that it may actually be safer to experience these attacks in Israel than it is in other parts of the world. We have to learn from you. What suggestions would you make as a civilian living there in Israel and involved in the organizations that you are? What suggestions would you make to us, for example, here in the United States? How should we be protecting our people in the cities? Because, these homegrown attacks are now happening here. And obviously, we don't have any experience. We have to learn from Israel. What can you teach us?
And thanks a lot. The number one thing I would say, the most important thing is to be vigilant. I mean, there's a sense of vigilance here which is unprecedented. If you see somebody suspicious, if you see somebody acting awkwardly or wearing a winter coat when it's 85 degrees outside, there are all these different cues which really, can tip you off as to an imminent attack. I mean, just several weeks ago, pretty much in the exact same location as this attack, one of the residents of my community, who is a medic, was driving on his what's called an ambucycle. It's like a motorcycle, but it has all the medical equipment behind it. And he was driving nearly exactly identical to the same place where this attack happened, on the road outside our house here. And he noticed a woman, Arab woman, who was walking awkwardly against the traffic, and she just seemed out of place. So he immediately alerted the soldiers who were nearby, and lo and behold, she had a knife under her, fully dressed Muslim garb. She was hiding a knife, and she was arrested on the spot before she could carry out her attack. So vigilance, number one. Number two, I mean, in this country, you can't walk into the mall, you can't walk into the movie theater, you can't get into any really public area that's open to a lot of people without passing through security. I see a little bit of that now in the U.S. in terms of going into football games, but here, there's every public area, every public space, restaurants and cafes, they have a security guard at the entrance. And it's not, at the airports, the Israeli motto is that they're not looking for a bomb per se, but they're looking for a bomber. And that's really the difference. It's a different mentality. It's really overall, what we're talking about here is a vigilance which doesn't exist anywhere I've traveled around the world. I was just in Barcelona last summer. I just right before you had that horrible attack in Barcelona with the car ramming, and I was actually in Las Vegas last year, and people are just not awake or aware. You can see it walking in the streets, and unfortunately that's our reality, but that is our reality, and we are vigilant, and our security forces are vigilant. Things would be a lot worse if that were not the case.
Now, you've had some experience. I guess you're a director here of, am I pronouncing it properly, Gush Etzion Foundation?
Yes, exactly.
And this is an organization supporting educational, welfare, community development, and security projects. Tell us about your organization.
Sure. So I actually just started about 6 weeks ago. So this is a brand new gig for me. This is an organization here in the neighborhood of Gush Etzion. We have about 25,000 residents spread out over 22 communities under our jurisdiction. And what we try to do is we try to fill the gaps if there's a need in a community, whether it's a security need to prevent an infiltration from a terrorist, whether it's a security system, and there are all different types of systems. You're talking about cameras and fencing and volunteers who are on high alert. So that's one aspect. Another aspect is people who are needy. Just, you have people who can't afford to feed their families on the holidays. So we raise funds and maintain the funds necessary to help needy families. Whether 2 weeks ago I was at a playground dedication ceremony, partially funded by our organization in one of the 22 communities. So all different types of projects like that. There's also religious projects. All these types of projects are under our jurisdiction. We try to enhance the life and the lives of our residents here living in Gush Etzion. It's a beautiful, beautiful area. I was actually working at the Jerusalem Post Radio, and we hosted G. Gordon Liddy. This was back in 2003, I believe. And he described this area as Scottsdale, Arizona. So I've actually, it's Scottsdale, right? Not Scarsdale. Scarsdale's in New York, Scottsdale's in Arizona, right?
That's right.
You got it.
I still got my U.S. geography. So that's the best way I think to describe this area, this community where we live in here. It's a beautiful, beautiful place. Warm summers, nice and cool in the summer evenings. Actually, today's the first major day of rain here in Israel, and we thank God for the rain. It's very, very necessary for our crops and our water supply. So it's actually a rainy, cold day. It's about 48 degrees Fahrenheit right now. Just a beautiful area of the country and a historic area all the way back from the biblical days and all the way back till the 1920s, 30s, and 40s when this area was developed. And that's a whole long story which we won't get into now. But the people should check out the Gush Etzion Foundation and Gush Etzion, the area in general.
Here on the Conservative Commandos radio show, we are speaking with Josh Hasten. He is the host of Israel Uncensored on the Land of Israel Network. Josh, I was listening to you and Anna talking, and you said something that really hit home with me. You said that in Israel, you're not looking for a bomb, but you're looking for a bomber. Josh, I think the problem here in the United States is they are looking for that bomb. And when you see what's going on here in the United States, compare it to Israel. What is with the mindset of the American where they think that we are safe? I think that we almost have a false sense of security. Would you agree with that?
Listen, I was still living in the U.S. On 9/11. I mean, I think everyone knows where they were on that horrific day. And when I travel there now, again, it's this look on people's faces. And I'm not saying you have to be paranoid, and I'm not saying you have to be over sensitive towards the situation, but you have to maintain just a minimal sense of vigilance about your surroundings. When I was in Barcelona just last summer, I was looking around on the Ramblus there where this truck attack happened just a few months ago, and I just noticed, maybe it's from living so long here in Israel, I just noticed people are just moseying about, wandering the streets as if this is 100 years ago, and it's a sad reality that we have to deal with this jihadi terrorism. But I just don't think, even after 9/11, I just don't think that unfortunately the American public gets it. And there've been, you had the attack in Orlando and Fort Hood, and you can go on and list the attacks. But America is also such a vast and big country. What is it, 270 million people? Israel's a tiny country, 10, 12 million people in a tiny, tiny area. So, and we've been fighting for our existence now. We're celebrating our 70th birthday here in Israel. So whether you take that number 70 or you go back to the beginning of the 19th century when the Jews started coming back home to Israel, we've been living through 100 years of terrorism. So I'm not going to say you accept that reality, but again, it's just a heightened awareness and a familiarity with the enemy. I mean, that's really what it is, because we're such in close proximity to some of those people who want to annihilate us, take us, throw us into the sea, get us, wipe us off the map. So that's why I think we're so aware here, as opposed to such a vast country like the U.S.
Well, I think, Josh, we're going to have to start becoming aware like that here in the U.S. As you so aptly described, if we are aware and vigilant, we might be able to thwart attacks as they happen. The most recent attack in New York City was accomplished with a car on a running path, a jogging path. So I think if people in that area were actually aware of what was going on, they might have been able to avoid some of the carnage that occurred in that particular attack, because seeing that car coming, you might have been able to get out of the way. It's that people were not paying attention and were not expecting vehicles on that path, and they just were not in a state of heightened awareness. So I think we're going to have to learn from Israel and Israelis in your experience, and we're going to have to start behaving as you've described. But I want to get back a little bit to your organization and the welfare and the community development. I guess Israel is really quite a place of love for one another, and that's why you're all there. That's why you Aliyah there, because you care for each other in a sense of community that we don't have elsewhere. And so I think that's a point that needs to be made. But my producer is making signs that we need to go back to a break, because time flies when we're having fun here at Conservative Commandos Radio. So Josh, quickly tell our listeners how they can find more information about your organization and how they can follow you on your radio show at the Land of Israel.
Sure. In terms of the radio show, go to thelandofisrael.com. You can check us out there. That's the best way to go. In terms of the Gush Etzion Foundation, the best way to do it is probably through Facebook. Just type in Gush Etzion, Gushetizion. Type it in on Facebook. We update our page regularly to find out about all the important work we do for the community via our Facebook page and the website. But start with the Facebook page and go from there. And my shows, I have a new show up every Monday on the Land of Israel Network at thelandofisrael.com. So I would love it. Would love your feedback if you have a chance to check out the show. It's all about current events and news, some interviews with the top politicians and people in the news here in Israel.
Well, thank you very much, Josh Hasten, for spending time with us today on Conservative Commandos Radio Show. We hope you'll come back and speak with us again soon.